My mother stood under a ceiling of white roses and crystal chandeliers, raised a glass of Dom Perignon that cost more than my monthly rent, and smiled at 200 wedding guests before saying the words that finally severed every last thread tying me to the family I was born into. To my son Marcus, the failure, who somehow managed to show up on time for once, laughter rippled through the ballroom. Light, polite, uncomfortable. She wasn't done. "Let's be honest," she continued, her voice carrying that practiced tone she used when she wanted cruelty to sound like honesty. "We all know which son made me proud, and which one I'm still waiting on." Her glass tilted toward my older brother Derek, standing beside his new wife at the head table, grinning like he'd just won something he deserved. Then her eyes, cold, flat, final, landed on me. I sat alone at a table near the back, the only persons in the room not wearing formal wedding attire. Just my army dress uniform. The one thing I owned that still fit right after 16 years of wearing it in places most people couldn't find on a map. The dog tags around my neck caught the light. Nobody noticed, not yet. But they would, because in exactly 7 minutes, a decorated Marine Corps colonel was going to stand up from his seat at the bride's family table, walk across that pristine marble floor, and break down in tears in front of everyone who had just laughed at me, and my mother. The woman who spent 34 years telling me I'd never amount to anything was about to learn exactly what her failure of a son had been doing in the dark while her golden child was busy spending the money I sent home every month to keep him out of jail. Hard his. But before I tell you how a man dismissed as worthless became the reason 12 soldiers came home alive from Kandahar, hit like and subscribe. Because the reckoning I'm about to unleash in this room is going to be the most expensive lesson in respect my family ever received. And I'm done paying for it. Let me rewind. Hard is. Because if you're going to understand what happened at Derek's wedding, you need to understand how I got there in the first place. And that means going back to a gray November afternoon in 2006, standing in the rain outside a recruiting office in Tacoma, Washington, 18 years old, 2 months out of high school, holding a duffel bag with everything I owned inside it. My father had been dead for 3 years. Heart attack. Sudden. Violent. He collapsed in the garage while changing the oil in my mother's SUV and never got back up. I found him. I was 15. I can still smell the motor oil mixed with rain coming through the open garage door. Hard. Still hear the dispatcher on the phone telling me to start compressions, even though I could already see it was too late. After the funeral, my mother looked at me exactly once with something close to tenderness and said, "You look just like him." Hard. Then she never said it again. What she did say, over and over for the next 3 years, was that I reminded her of everything she'd lost, that seeing my face made her relive the worst day of her life. Derek, 2 years older, looked like her side of the family. Tall, charismatic, easy smile. He became her entire world the day we buried our father. I became the ghost in the hallway. The recruiter's office smelled like burned coffee and lemon cleaner. Staff Sergeant Munoz asked why I wanted to join. I almost told him the truth because my mother can't stand to look at me. And maybe if I leave, she'll stop being so angry all the time. Instead, he said, "I want to serve." He nodded. Hard. Slid the paperwork across the desk. I signed it in blue ink and shipped out to Fort Benning 6 weeks later. For the first time in 3 years, I could breathe without feeling like I was suffocating someone just by existing. Army didn't care what I looked like. It cared whether I could do the job. Turns out I could. Infantry. Airborne, Ranger School. Then a slot in a specialized reconnaissance unit that didn't officially exist in any public database. Ours. I spent 16 years in places with no names doing work that would never appear on any resume, leading soldiers through missions that ended with classified after-action reports sealed in folders most people would never see. I earned a Bronze Star in Ramadi, a Purple Heart outside Kandahar after shrapnel from an RPG tore through my left shoulder, and I kept fighting for another 40 minutes until extraction arrived. A Silver Star for something I still can't talk about that happened in the mountains along the Pakistani border in winter, so cold that 2 of my soldiers lost fingers to frostbite, and I carried one of them 3 miles through snow to an LZ while taking fire from 3 directions. I never told my mother about any of it. Not because it was classified, because she never asked what she did ask. Every few months when she bothered to call, was whether I'd sent Derek the money he needed, and I always had. $800 here for a DUI attorney. $2,200 there for rent he couldn't cover after getting fired from another sales job. $2,500 to pay off a loan shark in Seattle when Derek's gambling got out of hand. Over the course of 12 years, I sent home $47. Whole. Every cent of it went to my brother. I kept a spreadsheet, dates, amounts, reasons. What? I told myself I was helping family. What I was actually doing was funding a man who despised me, while our mother applauded him for surviving on my salary. Derek's engagement announcement came via text. No call. No family dinner. Hard. Just a photo of him on one knee, in front of a woman named Vanessa Hartwell, her hand over her mouth, a rock the size of a marble on her finger, the message below it. Finally doing something right. Momi stared at that message for a long time. Vanessa Hartwell. I looked her up, daughter of Marine Colonel Raymond Hartwell, decorated veteran, 2 combat tours, now semi-retired and running veteran outreach programs across Washington state. Vanessa was a pediatric nurse. Smart, kind-looking in her photos. Way too good for Derek, but Derek had always been good at performing. The wedding invitation arrived 4 months later, embossed gold lettering on ivory cardstock. Derek Brennan and Vanessa Hartwell, request your presence. 1. My name was printed on the inner envelope, alone, no +1. I hadn't dated anyone seriously in 8 years. Turns out, special operations deployments and long-term relationships don't mix well. My mother knew that, or his. She just wanted to make sure I knew she knew. I almost didn't go. Then I thought about my father. He would have wanted me there. So I booked a flight, pressed my dress uniform, hard, and drove to the Four Seasons in Seattle. On a Saturday afternoon in October, my stomach tight, my jaw tighter. The wedding was everything you'd expect from a man marrying into money he didn't earn. White roses everywhere. A string quartet. Hard. An ice sculpture shaped like swans. I walked into the reception hall and immediately felt every eye in the room skip over me like I was part of the furniture. Hard. My mother stood near the head table, wearing a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than my last 3 paychecks combined. She was laughing with a group of Vanessa's relatives, performing the role of proud mother of the groom. She saw me. Her smile didn't falter. She just looked through me and kept talking. Derek was holding court near the bar, one arm around Vanessa, telling some story that had a small crowd laughing on cue. I found my assigned seat, table 12, back corner, next to a couple I didn't know and an empty chair. I sat down, adjusted my uniform jacket, and felt the dog tags shift under my collar. I always wore them. Even off duty, they carried the names of 2 soldiers I'd lost in Helmand province. Men who died under my command. Wearing them kept me honest, reminded me what actually mattered. A waiter came by with champagne. I waved him off and asked for water. The ceremony had been fine. Generic vows, a few tears, a kiss that lasted too long for a room full of relatives. But the reception, this was where my mother came alive, because this was her stage. And 30 minutes in, she decided it was time to perform. The MC handed her the microphone. She stood, poised and perfect, and waited for the room to quiet. I want to say a few words about my sons, she began. My chest tightened. Derek has always been the kind of man who lights up a room. Charming, driven, thoughtful. From the time he was a boy, I knew he'd do something extraordinary. Applause. Derek raised his glass, grinning. She turned slightly. Her eyes landed on me. And then there's Marcus. The room shifted. A few people glanced back toward table 12. Marcus tried. I'll give him that. He joined the army right out of high school, and I thought, well, maybe structure will help him finally figure things out. A few uncomfortable laughs, my jaw locked. But 16 years later, he's still just Marcus. Still figuring it out. Still showing up late. I hadn't been late. I'd been exactly on time. She raised her glass higher. So here's to Derek, the son who made me proud, and to Marcus, the failure who somehow managed to show up on time for once. The room laughed. Not everyone, but enough. She drank. I didn't move, didn't stand, didn't react. I just sat there, staring at the water glass in front of me. Every muscle in my body coiled tight. Across the room, I saw Vanessa's face fall. She whispered something to Derek. He shrugged. That shrug told me everything. He'd heard her say worse. He'd probably laughed at worse. And he'd never once stopped her. My mother handed the microphone back and returned to her seat, smiling like she'd just delivered a heartwarming tribute. I pulled out my phone under the table, opened my banking app, hard, found the standing transfer I'd set up years ago, monthly payment to Derek Brennan, $800. I canceled it. Then I opened the spreadsheet, scrolled to the bottom. Total sent, 47,320. I took a screenshot, saved it, and waited. Dinner was served: salmon, roasted vegetables, some kind of fancy potato thing I didn't touch. I wasn't hungry. I was doing math. 16 years of service, 4 deployments, 2 injuries, 1 silver star, and I was still the failure at my brother's wedding. The couple beside me tried to make small talk. So you're military? Yes, ma'am. What do you do? Infantry. Reconnaissance. Oh, that's nice. She turned back to her husband. I didn't blame her. Most people don't know what to do with soldiers outside of saying thank you at airports. That's when I heard a chair scrape. I looked up. A man in his mid-60s had risen from the bride's family table near the front. He wore a dark suit, silver hair cropped military short, shoulders still broad despite his age. Colonel Raymond Hartwell, Vanessa's father. He was staring directly at me. Not at my face, at my chest. Hard. At the dog tags visible just above the top button of my uniform. His face went pale. He said something to his wife, then started walking straight toward me. The room didn't notice at first. Conversations continued. Glasses clinked. But I noticed because the look on his face wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. He stopped 3 feet from my table. His voice came out rough, shaking. Those tags. I stood automatically. Muscle memory. Sir. He pointed at my chest, hand trembling. 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. I nodded slowly. His eyes went glassy. Kandahar. Winter 2014. Operation Iron Resolve. The room started to go quiet. People turned. I didn't move. Colonel Hartwell's voice cracked. You're Sergeant First Class Marcus Brennan. Not a question, a statement. Yes, sir. He took 1 step closer. Tears spilled down his face. My son was on that mountain. The room went completely silent. Wide. I remembered that mission. I would never forget it. December 2014, Kandahar Province, a joint rescue operation to extract a Marine reconnaissance team pinned down by Taliban fighters in the mountains. 12 Marines, surrounded, no air support available due to weather. Ground extraction the only option. My platoon got the call. We moved fast, hit them hard, fought through an ambush that should have killed all of us. I took shrapnel in the shoulder, kept moving, hard. My RTO took a round through the leg. I carried him and kept calling coordinates. We pulled all 12 Marines out alive. I wrote the after-action report on a laptop in a field hospital while a surgeon stitched my shoulder back together. Ward. The mission got classified. The Marines got reassigned. I never saw any of them again, and I never knew their names. Until now, Colonel Hartwell's voice filled the ballroom. My son, Captain Jason Hartwell, was one of 12 Marines your platoon pulled off that mountain. He turned to face the room, tears streaming. The official report said Army Rangers executed the extraction. No names, no details, classified. Hort. He looked back at me. Jason told me one name. One. The ranger who carried a wounded soldier on his back for 2 miles through enemy fire while calling in cover. The man who refused to leave until every Marine was accounted for. He pointed at me. Sergeant Brennan. A woman gasped somewhere behind me. Colonel Hartwell's voice broke completely. My son came home because of you. He was there when his daughter was born. He walked her to kindergarten. He coached her soccer team. His hands shook. You gave me my son back. The room erupted. Not in applause, in shock, chairs scraped. People stood. Phones came out. Colonel Hartwell stepped forward and did something I never expected. He saluted me, full, crisp, formal. A Marine colonel, saluting an Army sergeant first class. I returned it, my throat tight. Then he grabbed me and pulled me into a hug so tight I felt his whole body shaking. Thank you. He whispered, thank you. The room stayed frozen. Then a voice came from the front. A younger man in a suit stood up from the bride's table, tall, broad-shouldered, crew-cut. He walked toward us. When he got close, I saw the look in his eyes, the same one I saw in the mirror some mornings. Combat. Dad, he said quietly. Colonel Hartwell released me and stepped back. The younger man extended his hand. Captain Jason Hartwell, USMC, retired. I shook it. His grip was solid, steady. I never got to thank you in person, he said, or his voice wavered. I have a 6-year-old daughter. She's obsessed with dinosaurs. Wants to be a paleontologist. He smiled, tears on his face. I got to read her a bedtime story last night because you didn't leave me on that mountain. Something inside my chest cracked wide open. I nodded once. Didn't trust my voice. Jason turned to the room. This man is a hero, a real one. Then he looked directly at my mother. and someone just called him a failure. Hard is. The air in that ballroom turned to ice. Every head swiveled toward my mother. She sat, frozen champagne glass still in her hand, her face drained white. Derek looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Vanessa stared at him, something breaking in her expression. Colonel Hartwell turned slowly toward the head table. His voice carried. Cold, final. Who said that? Nobody answered. Who? He repeated, louder now. Called this man a failure. My mother's mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. I spoke quietly. My mother, in her toast. The room sucked in a collective breath. Colonel Hartwell stared at her like she was something he'd scraped off his boot. Your son saved 12 lives. Ord. He's been awarded a silver star, a bronze star with valor, and a purple heart. He stepped closer to the head table. What the hell have you done? She didn't answer. Couldn't. Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair tipping backward. Hard. She looked at Derek, her voice shaking. You let her say that? Derek stammered. Babe, you let her call your brother a failure in front of everyone? She was joking. Does he look like he's laughing? Room watched in silence as Vanessa turned toward me. She walked across the floor, stopping a few feet away. I'm so sorry, she said. I had no idea. Not your fault, ma'am. She shook her head. It is now. This is my wedding. My family. Hard. And you should have been honored here tonight, not humiliated. She turned back toward Derek. We're going to have a long conversation later. Then she hugged her father and whispered something I couldn't hear. People started standing, one by one. Veterans first, then their families, then everyone else who understood what had just happened. 50 people. 100. More, the entire ballroom rose to its feet. Not for Derek, for me. Someone started clapping, slow at first, then louder. Horde. The applause built into a wave that shook the chandeliers. I stood there, alone at table 12, surrounded by a standing ovation I'd never asked for and never expected. My mother sat at the head table, abandoned. The women who'd been laughing with her earlier had turned away. Her champagne glass sat untouched. Mascara ran down her face in thin black streaks. Derek stood beside his new wife, looking small and pale, Holden. Child finally seeing his reflection for what it was. And me, I felt nothing. No anger. No vindication. Just tired of carrying their weight, tired of paying for their mistakes, tired of being invisible. Hard. I walked toward the exit. Colonel Hartwell caught up to me in the hallway. Wait. I stopped. He pulled a business card from his jacket. I run a veteran employment program. We help guys like you transition into civilian leadership roles. Good companies. Real pay. Respect. He pressed the card into my hand. You've been carrying the weight long enough, son. Let someone else carry you for once. I looked down at the card. Hartwell Group, Veteran Transition Services. Call me Monday, he said. I already have 3 companies asking about you. I nodded. He shook my hand one more time, then walked back inside. I stood there in the quiet hallway staring at that card. For 16 years, I'd bled for strangers. Hawed. And the only people who never saw it were the ones who shared my blood. I drove back to my hotel in silence, pulled off the uniform, sat on the edge of the bed in a t-shirt and boxed, staring at the dog tags in my hand. My phone buzzed. Words. A text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Vanessa. I'm sorry for everything tonight. You deserved better. If you're willing, I'd like to stay in touch. Your family, whether Derek deserves you or not. I read it twice. Hard. Then another text came through. This is Jason Hartwell. My dad gave me your number. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but you saved more than lives on that mountain. You saved futures. My daughter drew you a picture. Word. I'll mail it if you're okay with that. I set the phone down, lay back on the bed, stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in Seattle, my mother was probably crying. Derek was probably fighting with his new wife. And for the first time in 34 years, their pain had nothing to do with me. Monday morning, I called Colonel Hartwell. By Wednesday, I had 3 job interviews lined up. By Friday, I had an offer, $120,000 a year. Leadership role. Veteran-focused company. Medical benefits. Respect. I accepted. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. A crayon drawing from a 6-year-old girl named Emma. It showed a soldier carrying another soldier up a mountain under a sky full of stars. At the bottom, in wobbly letters. Thank you for bringing my daddy home. I framed it, hung it on my wall. And every time I looked at it, I remembered something my father told me once when I was 10 years old, or sitting in the garage while he changed the oil in that same SUV. People will judge you by what you take, son. But God judges you by what you give. I gave 16 years, 12 lives, 47,000 to a family that never saw me. Word is. And one speech I never got to make at a wedding where I was called a failure. But a 6-year-old girl I'd never met saw me. A Marine colonel saw me. And a room full of people who'd laughed at me stood and applauded until their hands hurt. I didn't need my mother's approval anymore. I had something better. I had proof. 3 months later, Derek called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Hey, Marcus. It's me. Look, I know things got weird at the wedding. She's not doing great. Vanessa's been asking about you. I just thought maybe we could talk. I could really use. I deleted it before he finished. Some people spend their whole lives taking. I was done giving. Ward his. If you've ever been called a failure by people who never bothered to see what you were building in the dark, this story is for you. If you've ever funded someone else's life while they mocked yours, this story is for you. Hard. If you've ever walked away from family because staying was killing you, this story is for you. You are not the failure. Hard. So hard his. You are the one who survived people who needed you to fail so they could feel successful, walk away, build your life. And let the people who dismissed you spend the rest of theirs wondering what you became after you stopped letting them define you. Wide. Hit like if you've ever been underestimated by your own family. Scuster if you're done apologizing for outgrowing people who never wanted you to grow at all. And share your story in the comments, because somewhere out there, someone else needs to hear they're not alone.